He one-shots all but the tankiest cards in the meta. He generates 4 energy by your second turn. He lets you simplify your game plan and autopilot the grind to Master Ball. This is why Charizard was the king of the Eevee Grove ladder. Now that the Eevee Grove season is coming to a close, I thought it would be good to look at the deck that was almost certainly the king of the Eevee Grove ladder. Maybe not the hardest deck, but the deck that gave you the most bang for your buck, and that is Charizard EX, Sylveon EX. Your basic game plan is just to use Sylveon, Oak, and Pokeball to power out your Charizard EX as soon as possible. You protect him with Lily and Giant Cape, you disrupt your opponents with Sabrina and Mars, and you crush Oricorio decks with Flareon. Okay, let's go over the cards. First off, we have Charizard EX, of course. 180 HP, one of the highest in the game. His first attack only costs 1 energy and gives you 3, which means if you play this card on your second turn, you can use your first 2 energies plus the 3 energies from Stoke to start dealing 150 damage per turn every turn from that point on. 3 retreat isn't ideal, but generally isn't that bad considering you get 3 free energies from Stoke. And the weakness to water is almost irrelevant in this meta, with the small exception of Greninja. Let's look down at Charmander, who, is a respectable basic Pokemon. Nothing special, but solid 60 HP instead of 50, does a reasonable 20 damage, 1 retreat. Moving over to Sylveon and Eevee, this package of course is mainly just designed to make sure that your Charizard is as consistent as possible. This is one of these decks that just uses Sylveon and Eevee as a card draw engine, and Sylveon obviously never attacks because you're only running fire energies in this deck. Sylveon's ability, Happy Ribbon, is probably the best ability in the game. It basically gives you 4 Professor Oaks. And Eevee's no slouch. While you'd prefer Charmander as your first basic, Eevee's also reasonable given that it draws you cards. The last card in the deck is Flareon. Against most decks, this is just an okay backup plan if you don't have anywhere else to put your energies, and you don't need to keep a spare Eevee on your bench to be open to play Sylveon. But against Oricorio is where this really shines. Your game plan switches from using Charizard to destroy all of your opponent's Pokemon to using Charizard to tank while you build up Flareon on the bench, and then switch Charizard to Flareon to kill Oricorio. Okay, switching over to the trainers and items, we will start with Oak and Pokeball. These are part of the draw engine in combination with Sylveon and Eevee. These 4 cards combined let you draw an insane amount of cards, making your plan to get Charizard EX out quickly very consistent. Once you have that Charizard out, Lily and Giant Cape are what protects your investment. Sometimes Charizard can take a little bit of chip damage while he's powering up and using Stoke, so Lily compensates for that. And Giant Cape makes it harder for your opponents to use cards like Giovanni or Red to one-shot your Charizard. Mars and Sabrina are how you interact with your opponents. Obviously, this meta, there's tons of Sylveon, which means people are drawing lots of cards, so Mars is a great way to keep your opponent's hand in check. This deck uses Sabrina instead of Cyrus because, let's be honest, most decks have a really hard time playing more than 1 card that can take 1 hit from Charizard. And of course, we use Rare Candy to skip straight from Charmander to Charizard. Okay, let's go over some example game plans. Your plan A is just to get Charizard out as fast as possible by starting out with a Charmander, and maybe plan A1 is to do the same thing with Eevee. The best case scenario for this deck is starting out with Charmander first, Eevee bench. This lets you go into Charizard as fast as possible, while still using Sylveon and Eevee on your bench to draw cards. Starting the game this way can often lead to you doing 150 damage by your 3rd turn and for every turn after that. Often opponents just concede in this situation. Charmander only starts are also pretty reasonable if you can get the cards. Sometimes all you need is Charmander and Professor Oak to win the game. Eevee first can also be a pretty reasonable start. It's usually a little bit slower, but you can more consistently get your entire Charizard line. Since you almost always need to use Stoke before you can attack with Charizard, you often have a spare energy on your second turn that you can use to retreat Sylveon or Eevee, which means your overall game plan isn't slowed down at all. Plus, sometimes Eevee and Sylveon can tank a little bit of chip damage, so that way Charizard comes in fresh. Your last main plan of attack is against Oricorio decks. Obviously, Charizard handles any of their cards that are not Oricorio, especially since most Oricorio decks only run other Pokemon with relatively low HP totals, but your main plan against Oricorio itself is Flareon. Often what happens is, Charizard comes out, you start powering up Charizard. They bring out Oricorio, which stonewalls you. You leave Charizard out to tank, Oricorio only does 50 damage per attack, which means Charizard plus Lilia plus Giant Cape can tank it for a very long time. While Charizard tanks, you find Flareon and build up its energies on the bench. And if need be, Sabrina can assist in this game plan, swapping out their Oricorio if you just need to snipe that last point. A couple other main things to keep in mind. At this point, Mars and Red Card are very common in the meta. This means, counterintuitively, sometimes you actually want to sandbag a Professor's Research or Sylveon. If you play out double Sylveon, Professor's Research in the same turn and end up with 8 cards at the end, but you're not in a position to play out your Charizard line, your opponent can play Red Card or Mars and basically immediately win the game. Slow playing your card draw sometimes, when you can afford to, means that even after your opponent shuffles your hand back into your deck is full of cards that will draw you more cards again. On that note, using Mars can sometimes be tricky. Try to make sure to only use Mars after your opponent has already used some of their card draw, or after your opponent already has 2 points. Pretty much every deck in the meta right now has Sabrina or Cyrus, so if you have a Sylveon sitting on your bench with a little bit of chip damage, Mars is your main way to get that Cyrus out of their hand. Overall, the greatest thing about this deck is the game plan is actually relatively straightforward compared to other decks in the meta. This means that your opponent has to make much harder decisions than you, and it gives them more room to mess up. That, on top of having a really good matchup chart, means that we leave the Eevee Grove season with Charizard as the king of the ladder. Let me know in the comments if you think I missed anything, or maybe just talk about your experiences playing with or against this deck.